All right, let's get right into it. Think back to 2020. I mean, who could forget, right? The year the entire world just slammed on the brakes. For so many people, it was a total disaster. Well, this is a story about a guy named Jake. And for him, it wasn't just his business that vanished. He felt like he vanished. But the way he found his way back, well, it wasn't with a new loan or some fancy business plan. Nope. It was with 10 days of absolute complete silence. In this quote, wow, this really gets to the heart of it all. Yeah, the financial loss was a gut punch for sure. But what really shattered was the person himself. I mean, when the very thing that defines you, your purpose, your identity, is just gone, that's the kind of loss that goes way deeper than any bank statement.
You know, it's a question a lot of us have probably asked ourselves at some point. When you hit rock bottom, when you're just surrounded by that feeling of shame and failure, what's the first step out of that darkness? How do you even start to move forward?
And this is where the story gets really interesting and maybe a little strange. We're not talking about some self-help guru or a business seminar. For Jake, the answer was found in the one place he was probably trying to escape the most: the quiet, empty space inside his own head.
So to really get the impact of the fall, you have to understand what was built in the first place. For Jake, this wasn't just a business. It was his entire life's dream, and it was built on a sacrifice that is just staggering.
Let's just sit with that for a second. Jake's dad, Jaden, he was a farmer. And for a farmer, that land isn't just property, it's everything. It's his past, his family's legacy. So for him to sell it all, to bet everything on his son's dream, man, the stakes just couldn't be any higher. This was way more than just money.
And for a while, it looked like the biggest, best bet anyone ever made. Jake's business absolutely exploded. It thrived, he was living the dream, proving everyone right. You know, he was that local kid who made it big, and you can just imagine the pride his father and his whole village felt. And then this, a tidal wave. The pandemic wasn't just some hurdle to overcome. For his business, it was an apocalypse. The supply chains, the customers, everything just vanished. Literally overnight, everything that he had built, everything his father had sacrificed for, poof, it was gone.
So the business collapsing was the outward sign of the disaster. But the real destruction, the truly devastating part, was happening on the inside. Failure wasn't just on a spreadsheet, it became a prison inside Jake's own mind. This line is just perfect. It captures so well how this thing works. It wasn't one bad day. It was this slow, creeping darkness that just seeped into everything. Until one day, he's sitting alone in a dark room, unable to even look at his phone. The light was just gone.
But you know, just when things seem completely hopeless, sometimes a door opens where you least expect it. For Jake, it was a random run-in with someone from his past, and that encounter would change absolutely everything.
Okay, so check this out. The guy who shows up and offers Jake a way out is Liam, an old friend who had actually betrayed him years ago and even got him arrested. But the Liam he meets now, he's a completely different person. He's gone from this reckless kid to a genuinely peaceful man, from selfish to charitable, and that change is so real, so profound, that it makes Jake stop and listen. I mean, when someone who wronged you that badly has clearly found some kind of peace, you want to know how they did it.
So what was Liam's big secret? A thing called Vipassana. Now, the key thing to understand here is that this isn't a religion. It has nothing to do with belief. It's just a technique. Think of it like going to a gym for your mind. For 10 straight days, you have no phone, no books, no talking. It's just you, observing your own mind, your own sensations, without reacting. It sounds intense, and it is, but for Jake, it was just crazy enough to be worth a shot.
And this is the analogy Liam gives him, and it's brilliant. Fire is going to burn you whether you're rich or poor, right? It just is what it is. And in the same way, your mind just is what it is. Anger, fear, anxiety, these are just forces of nature. And Vipassana, Liam explains, is just a tool to observe those forces, to understand them, not to blindly believe in something. It's a science.
So he does it. Jake signs up, with pretty much no idea what he's in for. And what he discovers is, without a doubt, the hardest and most important 10 days of his entire life.
This timeline really gives you a sense of the battle. The first 3 days, pure hell. With zero distractions, every mistake, every failure, every regret he's ever had just comes flooding in. But then, something starts to change. Around day 5, that constant chatter in his head starts to fade. And by day 7, he has this massive breakthrough. He realizes that when he feels pain, if he just watches it like a scientist instead of fighting it, it starts to lose its power over him.
And this right here, this is the core insight. Jake suddenly saw with total clarity that his mind was living in two places it shouldn't be, a past that was over and a future that hadn't happened. He was completely missing the only thing that was real, right now. And that simple idea changed everything.
Of course, the real test isn't what you discover on a meditation cushion, right? It's what happens when you step back into the real world. Jake comes home with this new mental toolkit, and life doesn't wait long to test him.
And you can immediately see the difference. The first harvest fails, a huge blow. The old Jake, he would have been back in that dark room. But the new Jake, he feels the pain, he observes it, he lets it be there, and then he gets back to work. Then, an even bigger setback. A huge deal falls apart. But instead of quitting, he remembers what his dad always said. The question isn't if you'll have a bad season. The question is, will you keep showing up to do the work? He's not his failures anymore.
And this is where it all pays off. Just look at these numbers. By bringing in this newfound focus, this clarity, and combining it with modern farming, Jake helps transform his entire village's fortunes. They go from $120,000 in revenue to $1.4 million in just 1 year. That's what, an 11 times increase? It's incredible. So this isn't some abstract spiritual win. This is a massive real-world success story, all built on a foundation of a clear and quiet mind.
So, what can the rest of us take away from Jake's wild ride? Well, it turns out the lessons he learned in that silence are things we can all use.
These points are basically the whole playbook. First, you can't solve your problems with the same thinking that created them. You need a new perspective. Second, when all that inner chatter finally quiets down, that's when real focus can show up. And maybe the biggest one of all, so much of our pain comes from holding on to a past we can't change. Realizing that letting go isn't about forgiving them, it's about freeing you. That's the key that unlocks everything.
And we'll just leave it on this final thought. No matter what fire has burned through your life, a failed business, a lost job, whatever it is, that fire does not get the last word. The disaster isn't the end of the story. What you decide to build from the ashes, that choice, that power, that's always yours.